This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech. They say there is one constant in life that is unavoidable, and that is someday we will all die.
But how we die has been a topic filled with taboos and fear of the unknown. We barely talk about it.
Well, today's guest does. He is Dr. Pierre Viens, who has come to support medically assisted dying or medical assistance in dying made in some cases. Dr. Pierre Viens, welcome to Believe in People. Bienvenue.
Bienvenue, Kevin.
You know, I think that there is a lot of perhaps misconception in the public, or maybe just we don't have the information. But the first and perhaps easiest question is, would you describe for us what medical assistance in dying means?
Well, medical assistance in dying is the way we in Canada and in Quebec call what most of people know as euthanasia.
Euthanasia.
Yeah. And basically, it is since 2015 that Quebec has voted a law permitting a person relatively at the end of her life, suffering from grievous and irremediable disease or condition in an advanced state of decline, causing to her intolerable suffering that cannot be relieved by acceptable means. And if this person is fully able to decide legally, she can apply for medical assistance in dying. When she does that in writing in an official formula, this formula is transmitted to a voluntary doctor that would accept to accompany this person with medical assistance in dying up to the last minute. So all doctors are voluntary. We are not obliged to accept being involved in the process of medical in dying. But if we do, then our job is to make sure that the person meets with the 4 basic requirements of the law. Actually, there are now 2 laws, one in Quebec and one in the rest of Canada, but they are very close one to the other. So, and this is perhaps the difficult part of the medical job here is to make sure that the requirements of the law are met with this person, that she really is suffering from a grievous and irremediable disease. In some cases, this is quite obvious. If you have a stage 4 cancer with metastasis all over the body, then it's no problem about it. But progressively, the law from 2015 have enlarged a little bit to include even persons who are not closely at the end of their life.
And Dr. Viens, I know that this is very involved, and I know you mentioned that this is can be like a 3-hour conversation, and I'm fascinated. May I ask, what inspired you to go from specializing in tropical medicine to practicing palliative care?
Oh boy, yeah. this is the beginning of the talk. Yes, I'm practicing medicine, all kinds of medicine, actually, from for the past 66 years. And to start with, I went as a bush doctor in the bush of Africa for 5 years, then came back and said, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in tropical medicine. I went to the London School of Hygiene Tropical Medicine to get a PhD, because in order to do research or teach at the university about these subjects, you have to have a PhD in addition to your MD. Okay. Progressively, I was getting involved more and more as a consultant in international health affairs, to the extent that in 1990, I was appointed as director of an international cooperation center in health and development. I was then in charge of huge development projects in Africa, especially during the beginning of the AIDS pandemic. And this lasted up to 1990, actually, when my then wife died of cancer at the age of 47. She died at home, and I was with her closely 24 hours a day for the last moment of her life. And then I realized that there was something that I had never heard about before, called palliative care. So I decided to progressively leave aside all these business of traveling around the world for international health problems and concentrate on palliative care, which I did for 25 years. I was then attached to the most important palliative care hospice here in the Quebec City area. And this put me into daily contact with literally thousands of people at the end of their life. All these at that time were cancer patients. And I realized that palliative care were quite good and quite efficient for the majority of the physical problems, like pain, for example, nausea, vomiting, cough, and all these sort of things. But palliative care was absolutely inefficient in the case of these immense existential suffering of the end of life. You know, this person, she knows that she is on a trajectory towards death. She knows that yesterday was better than today, and today is worse than tomorrow. And there is no coming back on that. So their life, to some extent, make no sense any longer. They're not useful to anybody or anything.
What do they say to you, doctor? What do they say to you, doctor? I mean, are these people... in my research leading up to this interview, one of the things that I found interesting is that no one says to you, please help me die. They say,
never.
What do they say?
They don't want to die. They want me to help them end this suffering. And they realize, and they know, and we discuss about that, they realize that ending this suffering, the only means acceptable to them is medical assistance in dying. They don't want to get involved into an endless agony like our population were used to since thousands of years. They want to be fully in charge of their own departure. They want to decide that when I'm not be able anymore to care for my own hygiene, when I'm not be able to simply get out of the bed and go to the washroom and come back without, the risk of breaking my leg, then I want in full dignity and in full clarity of mind, I want to be able to say, the time has come for me to go. Can you please make sure that I can do that safely, without pain, quickly, and efficiently? So this is a matter of dignity. This is a matter of making sure that, like one of my old patients told me, he was 93. He was at the origin of 38 children, grandchildren, grandchildren. Wow. This man was like, I called him my oak, mon chêne. He, all his life, he had been working hard like hell, as a lumberjack in the lumber industry and so on. And the reason why he was with a stage 4 cancer at that time, he had a few months to go. And he said to me, I don't want my 38 children and grandchildren, to assist in an agony. They have not known me as a man, condemned to his bed and so on. I want that the last souvenir that they have from me is myself standing up and asking freely to go out. I realize that I'm not describing correctly what it is, but
doctor, how are the families? How did they resolve themselves to somebody saying that? Because I know it must be difficult.
Well, I have to tell you of my own experience, because this is quite variable from one case to the other. But from my part, in the past 8 years, I have accompanied 250 people in a medical assistance in dying. Most of them were at home with their family, friends, and so on and so forth. In my experience, all the families were in agreement with their loved one, asking to go out in dignity. All these families were sad. All the families said, I respect him or her to the extent that I accept their decision as the best one for them, and now less than for you too. I had never a case who changed his mind, because when a person asks me to provide assistance, to provide for him medical assistance in dying, the evaluation process to make sure that he meets with the requirements of the law is the difficult part of it. It can extend to days. The average amount of time that I have to devote to dealing with a single case can go from 10 to 20 hours. Wow. Of conversation. discussing with the patient and the family to make sure this is really what he wants, and that he is aware of alternative options and why they are not acceptable to him or to her.
Mm.
So the other things I realize, beside the what the family feel, is what the patient feels. All of these patients, I said that never they have changed their mind, but more than that, when the day comes, when the day they have decided, the day and the hour comes, they are of the most impressive serenity I ever seen. All of them, without any exception. And this is also noted from the family number. Remember, one of the daughters one day said, "Mommy, I never realized that you were so brave and so, comment dire, so,
Strong? Fort?
oui,
Wow, strong.
Right.
Listen, perhaps it's just the way that we are raised. You mentioned earlier, for thousands of years, we have had this, well, first of all, we're afraid of dying. And that's a given in our world. We're afraid to die. We don't know.
I'm not any longer.
Well, why don't you share with us how old you are, Dr. Viens?
Well,
You're 90.
no, not quite. I'm 86 only.
86. I apologize. But my question is, in our society, the medical community, the doctors, the nurses, they're supposed to do everything possible to keep you alive for as long as possible. That seems to be, I don't know, the Hippocratic Oath or whatever. You're supposed to do everything possible to keep someone alive. And in the end, if they die, well, we tried our best. But you were saying sometimes that's a bit too much, maybe.
Yes, it is.
Is it a moral thing? Is it a question of morality?
Humanity. Let's put it, since 2000 years, the idea is comparable to a sort of obligation to live. And medicine has been built with that in mind, and for that is, medicine is there to make sure that you live as far out as you can, quantitatively. The business of the quality of life that ensures from that is a very recent concern. And it's a recent concern of the people, of the person, but perhaps not yet of the doctors. Many of the problems that medical aid in dying helps to solve now is the fact that medicine, to me, is certainly one of the causes of our almost unacceptable longevity as a species at this time. Okay, it is very, very difficult for the major part of doctors, and especially the specialists, to envisage this sort of, and the French is sort of constat d'échec, that a demand for aid is according to them. That is, the way it goes, just the patient is followed up for cancer problems by an oncologist. And then they try, he proposes to the person all sorts of poison, chemotherapy or radiotherapy or surgery or whatever you like, on and on and on. And sometimes it succeeds in prolonging the life a little bit, but most of the time it also succeeds in getting it worse and worse and worse to suffer.
Dr. Viens, why aren't you afraid of dying?
I'm not afraid of dying at all.
Why are you not?
Because, well, I have to die. You know, it's a normal part of the whole business. I have not chosen to get into the world. I have not chosen to get born. This was an accident occurring between a spermatozoid and oocyst at that time. Okay. Then I went there, and it was a good period, a good trip, you know. The planet, so to speak, helped me to have a very interesting trajectory. But I know that this is temporary, and to me, that is nothing but the last period of it's a sort of how do you call it, étoile volante.
Ouais. The flight. C'est comme la 4e saison, là.
Yeah.
It's like the fourth, you're in the 4th season.
And to me, dying is simply stopping all this evolution and me getting back to the basic amount of molecules and so on that I'm going to release to the planet, for the planet to continue. Well, the problem is that usually the end of the trajectory is something that is not very interesting, because this body is going at the end of his life, is slowly disrupting, rusting, and so on and so forth. And I'm not afraid, actually, now of dying, in great part because of my assistance in dying. From the very first case that I did, when I get out of that room, after giving my first medical aid in dying to this almost totally paralyzed for 10 years person, I said to me, this is the way I want to pass out myself. And from then on, a great part of my work and my concern is not only to provide medical dying for people, but also to try to make these laws, they are good laws, but there are things to improve again. And I'm working very hard from that.
Doctor, Quebec is a very secular society now.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if you've ever been asked the question, do you think that you are playing God when you do this?
No, I've never been asked that.
Okay, what do you think? Are you?
Repeat that question, please.
Are you playing God when you administer death to someone?
Kevin, I don't know if I can say that on that podcast. I don't believe in God at all. I did at the beginning, but I changed my mind. To me, this is no problem at all. To me, God has nothing to do with that.
That's why I
That's
said,
fascinating.
well, that's why I wanted to say that we're speaking, it is a very secular society, one that has lived
Yes.
through a lot of religion over the centuries, but it has changed and people's attitudes are changing. And you're finding people.
Yeah, but this is not on the maid business is not only in Quebec. It's in all the rest of Canada as well. But as I'm part of a national forum of maid involved doctors across Canada, this is a very interesting experience for me because for the past 5 years, I'm part of their very intense internet confidential forum. And this has permitted to me to see how the whole affair is considered in the rest of Canada. This is quite interesting. And this is where I realized, as you said, Kevin, that Quebec was perhaps the most successful secular society so far. But in the rest of Canada, there are situations where I feel that religion is doing a great part. One thing that has struck me constantly at the beginning is that palliative care people were, and I think still are, heavily opposed to medical assistance in dying. This has always caused a problem to me. Why was this so? And when I realized that, I thought first it was only strictly a Quebec situation. Our palliative care doctors here, it's slowly changing, but they are still opposed to me. It is not for religious reasons, I think. It's mostly about medical paternalism. That is, a person at the end of her life, usually she first applied for palliative care. And in palliative care, the attitude is also a sort of obligation to live, hopefully without suffering, but it's an obligation to live. The fact that we must accept that the person is in fact the owner of her life. God is not the owner of her life. Doctor is not the owner of my life. I am the owner of my life. And I think in Quebec, MAID has come from a huge and deep societal move about it. The law that we have in Quebec came after 2 or 3 years of intense societal consultations. There were thousands of memoirs and of interventions and so on before the government drafted out the law to make that possible. So to me, MAID is a sign of a deep societal change in the way that perhaps for the first time or with that intensity, a whole population wants to be able to control her own health. Just take the whole business of treatment refusal. This is central to the MAID conundrum, the question of treatment refusal. And in many cases, especially at the beginning of the MAID process, where there was another condition that you had to be at the very end of your life to be eligible for MAID, many patients on a trajectory towards death as a cancer patient refuse, and treatment refusal is legal in Quebec and in Canada, providing it is from a person judged as able to decide. And many cases of medical assistance in dying were considered as legal, these persons eligible, because the fact that they were refusing the treatment that were proposed to them put them really in a situation of being left with a very short prognosis of life. And at the beginning of the process, it was necessary to have a short prognosis of life to be eligible for MAID.
You know, our half an hour is almost up, and every week we ask the same question to our guest, and it's interesting. You use the word life there. Life is everything to people. Life is the world. But you are helping people end their life with dignity, as you mentioned earlier, with respect, with a feeling of their power of their own life. Despite all that, why do you believe in people?
Precisely because of that sense of dignity that is so intense that it influences the choice of the way they want to die or to pass on. It's a good thing that this is so.
Well, Dr. Viens, we are grateful for you for offering dignity to those who are finishing their trajectory of their life. And we are grateful for your time and your knowledge. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for being with us. Merci bien, bonne journée. Well, I must say that was really fascinating.
Yeah, he's a really interesting person. And I actually felt, I don't know, some kind of contentment with, I'm not afraid to die. And I'm also, and the fact that he's destigmatizing MAID or destigmatizing the helping one end their life if they're in pain.
Yes.
And I think it's your choice. And
it comes from his own personal experience watching his wife pass away.
I know. Good for him. He's from that experience, he decided that he wanted to help others. So hats off to him.
Well, obviously, this is a man who has had experience not only personally dealing with what we would refer to as a tragic death in the family, but he, as he mentioned, was involved with the AIDS crisis, and he worked as a medical doctor overseas. And yet he's such a gentleman when it comes to what is going to happen to all of us, which is that we are going to have our last day. Very inspiring conversation. And if you were inspired by this, please subscribe to our little podcast, Believe in People, and join us again next week for another episode. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, everyone. you.